Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate 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 Vasudevaya.
Hare Krishna together. Also some faces I didn't see since a long time. Hare Krishna, welcome back. So I decided today to pick one Bhagavatam verse, and the topic is the process of inquiry and how to ask effective questions for spiritual development. And the Srimad Bhagavatam starts with the chapter entitled, someone knows it?
The sages of
The questions.
questions of the sages.
Yes, the questions of the sages. So it starts right there with inquiry. So we're going to read from the second chapter though, text number 5, and go word by word. Munayaha
Munayaha
sadhu
Sadhu
prishtoham
Prishtoham
bhavadbhir
Bhavadbhir
lokamangalam
Lokamangalam
yat
Yat
kritaha
Kritaha
Krishna samprashno
Krishna Samprashno
yenatma
Yenatma
suprasidati
Suprasidati
Munaya sadhu prishtoham
Munaya Sadhu Prishtoham
Munaya sadhu prishtoham
Munaya Sadhu Prishtoham
bhavadbhir lokamangalam
Bhavadbhir Lokamangalam
bhavadbhir lokamangalam
Bhavadbhir Lokamangalam
Yatkrita Krishna samprashno
Yatkrita Krishna Samprashno
Yatkrita Krishna samprashno
Yatkrita Krishna Samprashno
Yenatma suprasidati
Yenatma Suprasidati
Yenatma suprasidati
Yenatma Suprasidati
Munaya sadhu prishtoham
Munaya Sadhu Prishtoham
bhavadbhir lokamangalam
Bhavadbhir Lokamangalam
Yatkrita Krishna samprashno
Yatkrita Krishna Samprashno
Yenatma suprasidati
Yenatma Suprasidati Munaya Sadhu Prishtoham
Munaya sadhu prishtoham
Bhavadbhir Lokamangalam
bhavadbhir lokamangalam
Yatkrita Krishna Samprashno
Yatkrita Krishna samprashno
Yenatma Suprasidati
Yenatma suprasidati
Munaya Sadhu Prishtoham
Munaya sadhu prishtoham
Bhavadbhir Lokamangalam
bhavadbhir lokamangalam
Yakrita Krishna Samprashno
Yatkrita Krishna samprashno
Yenatma Suprasidati
Yenatma suprasidati. Ladies. Good. Munayaha
Munayaha
O sages.
O sages
Sadhu.
Sadhu
This is relevant.
This is relevant
Prishtaha.
Prishtaha
Question it.
Question it
Aham.
Aham
Myself.
Myself
Bhavadbhihi.
Bhavadbhihi
By all of you.
By all of you
Loka.
Loka
The world.
The world
Mangalam.
Mangalam
Welfare.
Welfare
Yat.
Yat
Because.
Because
Kritaha.
Kritaha
Made.
Made
Krishna.
Krishna
The personality of Godhead.
The personality of Godhead
Samprashnaha.
Samprashnaha
Relevant questions.
Relevant questions
Yena.
Yena
By which. Atma.
Atma
Self.
Self
Suprasidati.
Suprasidati
Completely pleased.
Completely pleased
Translation and purport verse Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. Purport. Since it has been stated herein before that in the Bhagavatam the absolute truth is to be known, the questions of the sages of Naimisharanya are proper and just. because they pertain to Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth. In Bhagavad Gita 15:15, the Personality of Godhead says that in all the Vedas there is nothing but the urge for searching after Him, Lord Krishna. Thus the questions that pertain to Krishna are the sum and substance of all the Vedic inquiries. The whole world is full of questions and answers. The birds, beasts, and men are all busy in the matter of perpetual questions and answers. In the morning the birds in the nest become busy with questions and answers. And in the evening also the same birds come back and again become busy with questions and answers. The human being, unless he is fast asleep at night, is busy with questions and answers. The businessmen in the market are busy with questions and answers. And so also the lawyers in the court and the students in the schools and colleges. The legislators in the parliament are also busy with questions and answers. And the politicians and the press representatives are all busy with questions and answers. Although they go on making such questions and answers for their whole lives, they are not at all satisfied. Satisfaction of the soul can only be obtained by questions and answers on the subject of Krishna. Krishna is our most intimate master, friend, father or son, and object of conjugal love. Forgetting Krishna, we have created so many objects of questions and answers, but none of them are able to give us complete satisfaction. All things but Krishna give temporary satisfaction only. So if we are to have complete satisfaction, we must take to the questions and answers about Krishna. We cannot live for a moment without being questioned or without giving answers. Because the Srimad Bhagavatam deals with questions and answers that are related to Krishna, we can derive the highest satisfaction only by reading and hearing this transcendental literature. One should learn the Srimad Bhagavatam and make an all-around solution to all problems pertaining to social, political, or religious matters. Srimad Bhagavatam and Krishna are the sum total of all things. Om Ajnanatimrandasya Vinanjana Shalakaya Chakshurumiritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Svavarantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vagishayasya vadhane, Lakshmiriyasya chabakshasi, Yasya hridaye samvit, Tam narasimham ham bhaje, Pradada hridayaladam, Bhaktavitya viram, Sharatindu vande, Parindra vandanam harim. Once more the verse. O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. So we can hear in this shloka that Srila Prabhupada very emphatically in purport makes the point that everyone is constantly busy actually with inquiring or asking questions or answering them or like receiving answers and giving the questions or constantly everyone is busy with that and makes the point that obviously there's a relationship between placing questions, inquiring and satisfaction. We have an urge to know and actually when we ask we want to be blessed, so to speak, with a satisfying answer. If I ask you something, then I'm only satisfied if your answer is also, practically relating to the question in a way that it gives me an answer, so that I feel satisfied temporarily, no matter, it depends on what it is that I'm asking you about. So here the point is made that questions relating to the Absolute Truth, to Krishna, are the only worthy questions or relevant questions. So today I also would like to focus on relevant questions, on the process of inquiry, since this is actually, if not the most essential process, besides of course the chanting, because the whole way through the scriptures live based on someone asking questions and someone who's competent to answer the question, so that the result is enlightenment. But actually both those who ask the questions must have the right questions, and those who give answers must be competent to give answers. Otherwise this process cannot be fruitful. We can also compare putting questions or making inquiries to imagine it as a key. You know, each key has some keyhole, some lock or some door to which it fits. So a good question practically is capable to be the key to opening up some realization, some new perspective. But if sometimes I just don't, it's not that I don't get answers. Sometimes the problem is that we don't ask good or proper questions, or like sometimes asking the wrong questions. So we would like to look on that today. And questions also relate to Shraddha. Let's have this already said right at the beginning. Since also Bhakti Yoga, it said, starts with the stage of Shraddha, trust or faith. And what happens? It's the most simple thing is someone meets you on the street, what do you have there? It's a little inquiry, some curiosity, but there it starts. Someone wants to know, what is this about, what you're doing? So then you tell, and if this person is receptive and open, there might be a fruitful outcome. So this is the beginning. If there's some faith, some trust, then I might ask questions because some thirst for more is being created. I want to get to know stuff, I want to learn more, because it interests me or stimulates my interest. So, and the questions are also, you can see, if you get good questions, you feel more inspired to speak. If the questions you get perhaps are for you puzzling or sometimes not clear or like not so relevant, you might not feel so much inclined to elaborate on them. So it's also a rule of communication. The more relevant the content of my speech, the more enthused the conversation. Because if we speak about things that are not really relevant, then there's so-called prachalpa, blah blah blah, but there's not much what to speak of satisfaction. Besides, there's no value or meaning. So this we can have in mind already, that questions relate also to faith, or like the, because faith is defined by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Madhava Kadambini, when he speaks about these stages. He also says it's not only about faith in the Shastras, it's also about enthusiasm to engage in activities being mentioned in the Shastras. So the faith is also connected to being willing to engage in the process. That's also part of faith. It's not just like a mental act, oh yeah, I trust you, but I don't engage in anything. So it makes actually sense to understand that Shraddha is also about activity based on the trust. And here, the first instruction, also in the Vedanta Sutra, someone records. Yes, exactly. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. And meaning what?
Now is the time to ask questions about the Absolute.
Yes, exactly. Saying now is the time to inquire about, or like ask questions about the Absolute Truth. And the word now refers to having a human form of life, having a human body that is capable to be more broad, to be more conscious. And in this way, one can and should use that capacity to increase one's own consciousness, and concretely meaning Krishna consciousness, because one is capable. Srila Prabhupada mentions also the birds and the beasts, and how the birds are daily busy asking questions and answers. But what are they asking? You know, they're asking, where's food? Where's shelter? How can I protect myself? Where is a mate? So this is the basic questions they ask, and it doesn't go beyond the physical needs practically. You know, they're also not meant for, they don't have to. The bird doesn't have to sit in Srimad Bhagavatam class and ask relevant questions, because this is not what he's meant for. You know, but a human being, the human being is meant for that. The human being has to develop consciousness, and therefore, actually by Shastra should feel obliged to use it. Because everything we get in this particular capacities and don't use, Krishna will take it away, because the message we give is, I don't need it, so I don't have to have it. So that one gets a living, one gets a body that fits one's desires. And if I don't want to develop myself and just be satisfied with, as Prabhupada says, eating, sleeping, mating and defending, well then I get a body accordingly. So that's the basic principle. And so now Advaita Brahma Jigyasa, jetzt now in this new form of life, one should learn, let's call it the art of asking relevant questions about the truths of the self and the Supreme Self. And as also one in the Vedanta Sutra, there's one famous, let's say, what's called Shloka verse that defines what is the actual truth or absolute truth. Someone remembers that? Starts with Sarvam. Sarvam Kal Vidam Brahma. It says, the absolute truth is that from which everything emanates. So it's a very precise shloka saying, right, everything exists. The relative truths are based only on an absolute truth that are your foundation. And I said Krishna practically is the absolute truth because he is the source of everything that exists. So he's the primary truth. And we all know that the inquiries are meant in the first place that someone seeks a sadhu or a guru, someone who is competent to to answer your questions. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita in 4:34, Tadviti pranipatina pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. So go to a person who has transcendental knowledge, ideally has it fully realized. We have different levels of gurus, and inquire from him submissively, it is said, pariprashnena. Then also sevaya, render service, and then this personalities, they can reveal knowledge to you because they have seen the truth. Tattvadarshina, someone who is connected or conscious of the truth. If we speak of knowing the truth, we actually mean someone is really conscious, he can see literally with his mind. Because often what happens is we don't see things when we say we don't know things. Also about people. Sometimes you might not know how to estimate a person such and such. But if I'm, let's say, capable if my mind is sharp enough, if I can read, let's say, body language, if I can read behaviors and so on, then I can see much more literally what kind of person is that. Not a visual seeing with the eyes, but a mental seeing. So there's spiritual vision as well, where you see through the layers of matter and you can connect to consciously to the underlying spiritual reality of everything. So that's the self-realization, where one can also even see Atma, where one sees through all the shells of this body, the gross and the subtle shells, and can literally perceive the spirit self. That's what said Pandita Samadarshina, that truly self-realized, therefore don't see differences in the physical bodies, but they see the Atmas having a different dresses, like as we are dressed differently now. So seeing the Atma, that's actually one of the big accomplishments of self-realization. And let's relate to also Bhagavad Gita shloka, where Krishna is saying the 4 types of people start to render service to him. And as we find in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, saying Jadavidha bhajante man jana sukritino vijjana arto jigyasu artavati gyanicha paradarshavah. Or best among the Bharatas, Arjuna, 4 kinds of pious men render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching knowledge of the Absolute. And later on, of course, Krishna continues, whom he considers to him the most dear, and we will discuss why. But let's look first on the aspects, what are these people asking? What is their consciousness, so to speak, when they inquire? Because of course they come to Krishna and serve him, but there's a motive behind the need. So those who seek, what is it called here? The distressed, they ask, how can I get relief? That's their main inquiry, how can I get shelter, protection? And the seeker of wealth is asking, how can I get rich and wealthy and influential? And the curious person is asking, what is there to know, what might be interesting? So he's just open. And then the seeker of the absolute truth is asking, okay, what is the true nature of things? What is essentially, what is the truth? So he's asking that. So we see there are different levels of consciousness, and this is also something relevant for our daily lives, because we can see that the questions we raise or the questions we have, they reflect our consciousness. They reflect on what we are busying ourselves with. What are we inquiring about? If I inquire about just the newest development of iPhones and cars and whatever, then my consciousness is a lot there. Or if I'm inquiring a lot about what other people do, socializing and whatever, so then my consciousness is more on that platform. But if I inquire about self-realization, if I inquire about Shastra, philosophy, or spiritual practice, then it shows, okay, my consciousness is more there. And even if someone doesn't at all inquire, also tells something about his or her consciousness, meaning it's rather on standby. It's not much happening. A person who is not in any way really seeking inquiry doesn't obviously feel a need, or is not so much activated to inquire. We can also see with these four types of people, there's some stimulus for their inquisitiveness. Some are really in distress, and Baladev Vidyabhushana comments on his commentary on this shloka on the Bhagavad Gita, says that there are four types of people in the Bhagavatam that relate to these four inquirers, or like seekers. And the first one, the one who is distressed, is Gajendra, the elephant king. So it's the story of Gajendra was before King Indradyumna became elephant king. And he was one day walking in the heavenly regions through the forest with all his female consorts, and ultimately got involved in a fight with a crocodile in a lake. So where he gradually was inferior, or like being in danger to losing his life. So then he prayed. And his question was, okay, who can save me? How can I be protected? How can I save my life? And so seeking distress doesn't mean only difficulties, like, okay, I lack this or I lack that. Difficulties might also mean one is threatened by various types of dangers. So this Gajendra is mentioned as an example for these category, and for the seeker of wealth, Dhruva Maharaj is being mentioned. He wanted to have the kingdom unparalleled, more than his father's. At the same time, if you look closer though, he also fits automatically in the first category, because he was suffering from the pain that was inflicted by his stepmother, by the insult. He was hurt, his pride was hurt, his ego. Actually, he suffered from, we call in German, eine Kränkung, I don't know in English, like grave offense was done to him. And so then he developed a desire also to gain more wealth and become kind of a compensation, you can say. So he's mentioned for that. And the curious one is also mentioned. There's Shaunaka Rishi, he's also part of the Bhagavatam, the speakers, because he inquired at some point about the Atma, truth of the Atma. So he was considered the inquisitive one who's curious. And it said that Jnani as a fourth category, which is mentioned here, Shukadev Goswami, he already has knowledge of Atma and also Paramatma, but he's even interested only in, deepening or like relishing this knowledge and being practically situated in these absolute truths, which also means that he's willing to engage in the spirit of this truth. As we said before, like Shraddha is in one sense the trust in the scripture and that the philosophy, that it is true, that it is valid, and at the same time Shraddha includes enthusiasm to also engage in the activities mentioned in Shastra. So also like we shouldn't imagine only a person who is like practically an intellectual, likes to philosophize. No, it's someone who is seriously interested in the absolute truth and at the same time dedicating all his activities to this absolute truth, to this consciousness, means a devotional service. So we have these four examples of Srimad Bhagavatam fitting the four categories of people who take shelter of Krishna. And it's said, what we can understand, three of them are actually inquiring more or less only about material things relating to the bodies, relating to the minds. You know, the distressed person, like a gender, is like seeking protection for his physical body. Others might seek other reasons of protection. You see that in different countries or different religions. Sometimes you have on the airports, you have these prayer books where people write all kinds of interesting things in. If you would consider the prayer, it's sometimes more a bit like an order list. You can like online order this and order that. 2 pieces of please. But sometimes there's some more to it, a bit more introspective prayer. But usually it's about help. For example, help my daughter to pass her exam. You know, would be some general prayer or desire expressed to, where Krishna has asked for something, favor asking. And then it would be the seeker of wealth also. Like they are concerned with, let's say, more selfish needs, that use that word, and their relationship with Krishna becomes rather that of a, making a deal of sorts. You know, I pray to you, or like I worship you, and in return I would like to have this. So they make this deal with Krishna, and it said the third person, the curious one, is put in between with the understanding. Out of his inquiry, hopefully, like more serious inquisitiveness is born, that he becomes one of the fourth category, the jnani. The jigyasu can become jnani. So it's actually very most fortunate if one is already inquisitive, because this might be a stepping stone to become a truly serious seeker of truth. Because sometimes curiosity can also be superficial. Oh, I would like to know what's going on, and what is that? And then I've heard it, and then my curiosity might stop. You know, the experiences sometimes also, like in preaching work, you know, people are on different levels of interest. How deep do they want to go? I also remember my when I was baptized back then when I was 19, was invited in a Christian church, and we were standing in this river and was about to be baptized, put under water. And then he asked, for how long do you want to walk with Jesus, or something like this, in this direction? He gave me 3 options. He said something like, was it a few weeks or months, then for your life or forever? And then I said, yeah, forever. So it was all like, what question is there? In this moment, my enthusiasm was pretty high. So then he told it, okay, and then I was pulled underwater and it was sealed. Yeah, but I find interesting, in hindsight, I was wondering, why is he asking that? You know, that he also shared, his experience. Of course, some people, they come to like any religion, and for some time they might suffer, and if they find relief, they go, cool, good, so I can go back to normal. You know, don't have to bother staying there, doing all the stuff. So a bit more simplistic speaking. But yeah, it happens. Or like the seeker of wealth, they get what they want, their standard of living is raising, or their health is getting better, and they find a spouse, or like they get promoted and whatever they wanted. And then they feel, oh yeah, I'm fine, I don't need God anymore so much. Until next time have problems, then I will pray again. A bit like this might be. So like it depends really what is the motive, what is the questions we ask in life. And people ask nowadays mainly the question, how can I become happy? How can I enjoy best? Where is my benefit? Or like we can also say, what is in it for me? These are the inquiries of people nowadays. We also trained like that. Capitalism has the core assumption that the only question that really matters is, what's in it for me? And this is giving me drive. If you can give me a good reason that I have a benefit of what I'm supposed to do, I mean, if I don't have benefit, I mean, ideals is luxury for idiots. So I'm a pragmatic person. I want to see what is my benefit in terms of money, wealth, influence, and so on. So it becomes very self-centered. It becomes an inquiry based on my body, my mind. So how can I enjoy it best? So these are the inquiries, and people seek them all kinds of ways. Different answers are being supplied by the authorities, or like the people where the inquiries are put before. And the internet is full of people giving advices and coaching in so many ways, or being whatever, some types of gurus who tell people all kinds of success principles, which, by the way, they got very lucky that by chance something popped up on their website showing them this very magic secret how to get successful, And so then they pick up on that and try this and try that to attain certain apparent happiness. But obviously, the promise is more promising than the actual fulfillment that might be left out at the end, because it's often chasing after something that you might not even attain. And then if you attain it, it might turn out it's actually not that what I deep inside myself was seeking for. And sometimes we even don't know exactly what am I seeking for. It's also an age, Kali Yuga is an age of confusion, unclarity, dullness, and ignorance. We have so much influence in so many ways. So even if you ask a person, what do you want? The person might not be able to come up with an answer. I don't know. Sometimes you say, I know what I don't want, but not necessarily positively what do I want. It might have many reasons, but in fact there's lack of clarity. What to speak of, what is my true self-interest? What is the self? I don't know. So there's so many questions that can not be answered with people. And people not necessarily also inquire about but how could I become clear? What do I want? So therefore in the beginning there's also Shraddha, a certain trust or faith in someone that there is meaning in making inquiries, or there are people that are capable to create or to raise my awareness. So here the sages of Naimisharanya came together. Interestingly, they were not in these four categories, or in the first three categories they were not. They are all practically jnanis, they're rishis. And they actually put also a speaker, here it's the name's not that, Sutta Goswami there to speak, and they put questions in front of him. But they're not, in a sense, necessarily inquiring because they are in lack of knowledge or understanding. Actually, they say it's also he praises their questions. They actually discuss matters which are for the benefit of others who might not have raised the questions, or might have raised the questions, but didn't get answers to it. So they actually give also an example. They train us how to ask questions. They show us what are relevant questions that should be asked, so that we can attain also satisfaction of the self. That we even inquire about what is the true self-interest. And then if I get an answer to that, okay, true self-interest is to be related or connected with Krishna, our origin. Sarvam Kalamidam Brahma, he's everything, the source of everything, and my interest is to be connected with him in a loving relationship. My next question might be, okay, how can I live up to that relationship? What steps do I need to take? How can I get deeper? And so on. So then they discuss so many topics, and an inquiry doesn't have to be technically a question. So many inquiries are not technically a question. They're more sometimes statements, or a prompt. A prompt is when you make someone tell you more about something. For example, you might paraphrase, say, you mentioned now this and that, and so I wonder about how these two things go together. Technically, it's not exactly a question, it's a statement, but it implies, I would like you to speak more. So inquiry means make someone speak about things that are relevant. And it might be a question, it might be a statement, it might be a challenge. Even, people like to challenge nowadays also with questions, which are not necessarily productive, because there might be also a defense. I'm not actually asking, I'm trying to make you shut down or shut up, because my question would be, if there is God, then how can there be this and this and that? So I'm actually saying, don't come to me with your God ideas, because I don't believe it. So technically it's a question, but practically it's not an inquiry. Though you might get involved in a discussion, after all, and perhaps a person becomes open. So, but let me just shortly connect here. The Jnani, the fourth person, is the one who knows what questions are really relevant, namely those questions that pertain to the Atma, to the Paramatma, to self-realization. And Krishna says also a verse later, this person is most dear to me. Then Baladev Vidyabhushana is discussing his purport, but are you saying the others are not dear to you? He's saying only these Jnanis to the others you don't care. He says no, but the fact is, these Jnanis, they have no other interest in me. They want to know what is the absolute truth, and they engage totally in the process of bhakti to be in that truth, to realize their own true nature and their relationship with Krishna. And so they are fully dedicated, give themselves fully to Krishna, and this is most touching and pleasing to Krishna, because this is the fully committed relationship, so to speak. And they says, I give myself to them, and they are most dear to me. The others are also dear because they make an attempt to connect with me, but they in the first place, want something from me. Give me this, give me that, help me with this. So therefore it's highlighted that these people also, of course, are glorious. It says all of them are glorious, but most glorious is the person who understands that the most relevance are in the questions that pertain to the Atma. The other questions might also be relevant for shelter, for wealth and curiosity, but these Jnani questions, they are most essential. And it's also said in the Bhagavad, in the Chandogya Upanishad, I quote this word often, but sorry, this is something I find it so good to have the source that mentions that. It says that the Atma has like 6 qualities, and one of these qualities, that his only desire is truth. And I always over and over contemplate on that. It's one of my questions. What exactly does that mean? That the Atma has desire for truth. Something I could come up with is, for myself so far, that since the Atma is Sat Chit Ananda, Sat means eternal, Chit full of awareness or consciousness, that naturally his desire is like to be aware of things, or like that truth is like a natural part of the Atma, because he's actually naturally established in the absolute truth of Krishna, so he naturally desires to be there. Maybe you can compare it on a physical platform. If your nature is, say you are a priest, your desire is related to rituals or other priestly functions, because that's what you are, so on the material platform. Or if you're a salesman, you're always home in deal making. That's just naturally comes to you because that's who you are practically. So the Atma is, in a substance way, is truth. It means full consciousness, fully aware of what things really are. And that is something that is a process. In spiritual life, also we start asking questions, and then we get answers, and that doesn't mean, since we have the information, that we are truly aware. Everyone in the beginning gets the information. You're not this body, for example. You're the spirit self. But having this information doesn't make you aware necessarily that you are not this body. So you also anyway hear repeatedly, and now once more you're with the idea to gradually realize that. And in our coach training, what we did some years ago, our mentor made this point which I find interesting, which I use also nowadays a lot, since it's just really a grounded way of looking at things. Often we got to stay in the question or live in the question. That means that some questions are not necessarily answered on spot. For example, what is my true self? What is my Sarup, for example? Like in general, what is the self? How can I see it? This is a process where over and over again I have to invest in that question. And I might have to ask other questions around that to come to the answer. Before we said the inquiry or question might be compared to a key, which fits to a lock of a door, and it might be the key to the realization. If I have the proper question, then I might have a very good answer. If my question is not very clear, for example, or concrete, or we say spongy sometimes, also the answer cannot be very satisfying. So I must learn to sharpen also my questions and to be more differentiated in my questions, and then also I can get better answers. Sometimes also people say, yeah, I don't know, this and that person didn't enlighten me so much, didn't find it so good. And maybe this person is like that, but also let's look at what is the quality of your questions. What kind of things are you asking and how are you asking? So the sages here, they made a very good example. They practically worshipped Sutta Goswami, and also Sutta Goswami. And then asking, please tell us about this. And they praise his character, they praise his. I'm not indicating anything here about me. it's just about what is in the Bhagavatam as a process. Because also from my experience, I know if I approach someone in a very respectful way, in an inquisitive way, and show that I respect the person and I trust that this person has knowledge, then naturally I unlock also in this person the, how to say this, Wohlwollen, how do you say it in English? The kind of, maybe it's called compassion or like benevolence perhaps, to share with you whatever this person knows. And that's also something, the question and answer part is not so much only a dialogue where you ask and get answers. It's really engaging in a particular type of relationship with the person, because it's the guru that you might choose. It might be also a senior Vaishnava devotee you cultivate a relationship with. So depending on whatever level this relationship is, it is about though cultivating it with proper mood and respect and ways of dealings, so that you might get the most efficient inquiry process done. Because just like that, if you're being maybe also superficially asked, maybe someone just wants to make conversation or sound smart by putting a question at you. Alright. So there's true inquisitiveness, where the motive is, okay, I really want to know what is the truth, and I want to really grow and enhance. I want to move toward enlightenment. I really want to get there. I really want to see things as they are. This is true inquisitiveness. That you have this desire for truth. Fake inquisitiveness, on the other hand, might be you ask questions that might be also good questions, but it shows how seriously you are, whether you really accept answers and also work with the answers. Because it might be sometimes people engage in discussion over and over and over and over again, and you might wonder, is it really an inquiry, or is this just an ongoing debate? Just someone wants just to discuss all the time. Or like, is this person really putting things into action if you get an answer? About your self-realization. Let's say, for example, someone says, why don't you try to perform certain tapasyas like on Ekadashis or like whatever, reciting prayers, or like sometimes people nowadays like to do mauna, also like silence, so where you can experience your own capacity to control your mind and senses, which makes you able to realize the difference between you and your body. Because exerting control over mind and senses, gives you more of awareness how these things are also different from you. You're not identical with them. That means whenever your mind and senses want something, you don't have to obey. This you learn by practical tapasya, and like it might be getting up early and following a program, absorbing your mind in japa, or like refraining from mundane talk. All these kind of things Rupa Goswami also mentions in the Nectar of Instruction. You know, these things are practical advices that bring you closer to the realization of what is the Atma. And from there, like if you want more and more grounded in it, you have more conviction and stronger faith to follow this path. But if our inquiries are superficial or not serious, then they will not bear fruits. You know, they can also compare it. It's like a seed you put, but then maybe it gets little creepers and you don't cultivate it. And what to do? It will just die off again. So the inquiry is something, it's then very potent if you're very serious about it. We say also, Govinda Swami speaks also a lot about this sincerity, which is translated into simplicity. He highlights that simplicity is actually, also Bhaktivinoda Saraswati Thakur says that, if not the most essential quality of a Vaishnava, that he also, he gives the story of, compared to, he says, the crookedness, the simplicity person and crooked is the contrary person. And he mentions a story where someone invites one of his friends to come to see sadhu in some place. And I guess it's in Mayapur or somewhere. And then this friend always finds excuses because of the river or something. They have to go by boat once he cannot, because he gets sick on the boat or something. Yeah, and then whatever, there was no border, he always had another reason to not come. But he didn't honestly say that actually he doesn't have an interest. He always pretended, yes, I will come. So, but this is not honest. So, sincerity is very important. If you ask a question, you would be better off with really wanting the answer. You know. Also in therapy we have that sometimes. You know, we ask questions, and we assume we give the questions, and the people actually have the answers. So we have to find good questions that actually enable the person to become aware. You know, we can also make the connection between, in the spiritual sense, between the satisfaction. Because good questions that lead to answers that make you more self-aware, spiritually aware, lead automatically to more spiritual self-satisfaction. Because that actually the self, the Atma, is conscious, and if it's connected to the truth, it's also satisfied. Often what bothers us is that we are in confusion and ignorance, and that's why we suffer. Let me shortly So we mentioned a few questions now can be asked, and before I said that also it's not only about asking questions. Whoa, time ran off like anything. Okay, it's also about that we have the right questions. And I will give two examples for the end, and we can also have some more questions from the everyone present here or like online, that make a shift of perspective. And I want two examples come from my actually favorite Western philosopher, Immanuel Kant. He has brought two very powerful questions, I find. And one question is related to this inquiry is also about God, you know, and about is there God or not, and like how can I know God, and so on. And he asked differently. He made a shift in perspective. He didn't ask, is the thing we inquire about really true or false? He asked, what are actually the conditions for my capacity to realize things? So he is questioning the ability to know itself. He's not asking, is God there or not? So actually, how capable am I to anyway realize things? What are the conditions that need to be met? Which is a shift of perspective, which is very relevant, because the core assumption was before, yeah, I'm capable to know all that, and if my answer is yes or no, then this is how it is. But it's not being looked at, well, like, am I really a proper challenge? Do you have perfect senses? You don't have. So how can you make perfect statements about the absolute truth. So Kant is also shifting this question to from one part to the other, which is very relevant to look from the right angle if you ask something. And also with the question of happiness, he made a good statement. He said, we should not ask, how can I become happy? He said, we should rather ask, like, or look at, how do I become worthy of happiness? It's again completely a shift, like, from thinking of these things, like what do I need to get or to do or to take so that happiness arises in me. And he says, no, start from where's your capacity, so to speak, for happiness. And there his whole moral philosophy develops or like unfolds. In German he says, sich das eigene Glückes würdig machen, or like the English term maybe integrity, but let's say, how to get worthy of happiness. So this might be some food for thought, some stimulation on the process of inquiry. So I would open up for questions and comments and sharings.
Muss noch anmachen, glaube ich.
Hare Krishna. Do you also think that today's society, with all Facebook media, television, everything that we have, in some ways actually distinguishes all the questions that we have, that we have become dull and like a stone and we don't have any questions anymore? What is your opinion about this statement?
I mean, there's certainly truth in it, and hopefully people recognize it and come to a conclusion. Because as said before, dialogue can become very unproductive practically if people just stay in discussions, endless back and forth and talking, and questions become more of a, how do we call it, rhetorical questions, not even really inquiries, they're just used, to make statements or to devalue someone else. And an overflow of informations that are not relevant for you just make you dull. Then your mind is occupied with all kinds of stuff. Just like similarly, if you eat all kinds of things and then you become tired, and lazy, your belly is full, and this is what actually would be very substantial for you to eat, you might not even be able to take in. So therefore it's also good to keep a diet, a mental diet, bless you, by seeking constantly only those influences that you see are relevant for your spiritual life as much as possible. Because if you're engaged in the world and working and doing this and that, you might have to be willing and able to also deal with other sorts of informations and talk. But simply like this, also in spiritual circles, you should try to really prioritize only these really relevant informations, but also see where people are at. Like we see these 4 inquirers, they're on different levels. And Krishna says, I appreciate all of them, although one is most dear. That we also understand, even if someone's not on the top platform, it's not that we don't make it a black and white. Either you only ask all the time the most, Gyani stuff, only then I hang out with you, but rather say, let's have like a consensus that we say our priority is spiritual subject matters, and they might be mixed with things that we need, of course, we human beings on different conditions. But to select information and I guess we will not bring down our social media like that, but we can certainly acknowledge the fact that it makes dull in this regard, as you mentioned, and then be consequential. That's also important. Often people, that's also what I mentioned before, inquisitiveness. There should be also practical consequence. If you only ask, get answers, and you don't work with it, then your inquiry is also not very useful. There's even a term I cannot really, quote in here, it's a bit of a lower speech level. But it's like an ask, and then there's there's H-O-L-E. So it refers to a person who is asking questions and actually not being really interested in the answer, and only like talking and asking and Okay, so satisfying your question so far? Then comments, inquiries, questions? From online, is there something?
I think you already mentioned this with Tatvidipa Nipatena, and there was also Dr. Vikashmara spoke about this point today. Many lectures, especially Indian sometimes, they ask you many questions, and we try to understand everything by our intellect. And then we get the answer, yeah, Krishna is the supreme, we should do this and that. But actually the realization comes only then when we surrender to Guru. And then we start starving, and then we can really have the realizations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. This process, it's not the technical part only of asking questions, but it's engaging in the process. And then that gives you the experiences. Some questions can be realized more or less intellectually, and other questions are answered by engaging in making experiences, and that gives you the answers. You know, for example, people ask, what is my nature, what shall I do? And then they sit and talk about many things with many people about what should I do. But well, sometimes the answer is very simple at hand. Okay, try this one, make an experience, and then compare it whether it fits. Okay, if not, make another experience. Because we're also experiential learners. So therefore also true to life means you're practically engaged in devotional service, and there you realize things, not only on the intellectual platform. At the same time, you need, of course, a sharp mind, because some stuff is a bit complex and subtle, you know, so one should have both, you know. Alright?
Asking questions is also very much related to listening, right? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that maybe? Because also we hear that Prabhupada actually wanted to make us qualified listeners, and often we hear just listen to Srimad Bhagavatam and that's it basically, right? Automatically you will get purified and everything like that. So can you maybe connect this?
Sure, thank you for that prompt to talk more. There's a proper letter we like to use in our transformative communication workshops, and there Srila Prabhupada is talking to one of his disciples and mentioning the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. How Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was sitting for many days. Was it 7 days? Yeah, practically. First I thought, wow, he said like I counted the hours, you know, like 7 days means how many hours? But actually, they were not like 24 hours speaking, they were like 7 days in a row in their classes. So he was he was listening. So sometimes you can see how how your mind understands things, you know, which are maybe inaccurate. I hear 7 days and I assume 7 times 24 hours, you know. So but he was listening simply, not saying a word. And Srila Prabhupada said we should learn from Mahaprabhu. That he learned from Bhattacharya so many things, and only at the end, when he was asked, he presented his point of view. And Srila Prabhupada mentioned, so also we should be prepared to meet our many sharp minds with their inquiries and talks and questions, and we should be able also to appreciate them and tolerate their viewpoints, even if they're completely contrary to ours. So listening means to be also able to hold a space for someone else, and not just try to preach them to death, you know. I defeated you, yes, success, but then this person is just like, how to say, completely turned off by you, which equals turned off by Krishna consciousness. So that's not the goal. Of course, that would be an extreme. But yes, capacity to listen is important, because what also happens in debates, like unless they're very professional, is that people misunderstand actually what does the opponent say. And why? Because they don't properly listen. You know, because listening is inquisitiveness. You know, and we have to properly absorb what is being said, and ideally being able to also paraphrase, reflect it, and then to accurately also respond to that. Also in therapy or in counseling, it's the same process. If I need to be able to really understand, or have a desire to understand what is what the person next to me saying. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was giving a perfect example, because also with the Digvijaya, he was on the Yamuna, on the Ganges. Ganges, yes. And then he pulled his 100 verses out of nothing. then ask later on, so, what do you think about my poetry? and Chidan Mahaprabhu made this nice remark, I remember that. He says, your poetry is so great, only you and Mother Saraswati can understand. It's too difficult or complicated for regular people, but yes, so great, only you and Mother Saraswati understand it. And then he picked one of these 100 shlokas, and perfectly recorded and recited it and pointed out the mistakes. Okay, this was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But interesting is he first of all welcomed the speaker with respect, though he was a very puffed up person, obviously very obnoxious. And still he said, no, please be seated and tell him that he was behaving respectfully. And then when the inquiry came, what is he thinking, he said what he thinks. And Digvijay was not so pleased. Then he was also astonished. How can this Mahaprabhu, how can he recall just one of these shlokas just like that I composed? And plus, he could not counter-argue that Mahaprabhu was right, in terms of Sanskrit language, etc. And also in Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, same thing. He says, actually, your commentaries are misleading. The direct and simple explanation is this and this, and Vyasadeva has given the natural commentary on Vedanta Sutra. So, it's a good strategy. First listen, absorb what is the other person saying, because then you're clear what they are saying, and then respond. Then you have much, also in preaching, tactical advantage. Because you know, what is this person actually saying, and instead of assuming that you know. You might assume, this person looks like that, he's from this camp or this religion, he must certainly think this and that. Mistake. Because what if this person is different and then you look stupid, though you think you're smart. So it's always good to inquire also first from the others, okay, where are you coming from, what do you think, and what is your philosophy?
But basically also there, the most important thing is in listening also is the desire to know. Like when asking questions also, this is like the bottom line of it.
Yes.
You really want to know.
Yes,
otherwise it makes no sense.
Exactly. It also makes sense, you can feel when you speak to a person, and you can sense is this person truly interested or only making conversation superficially. And similarly in other ways, if you can feel, are you understood or not by the person's response? If someone is practically demonstrating complete ignorance about what you just said the last 5 minutes, then you feel, okay, no need to share.
This is just a comment in regard of the process of hearing and asking questions. Of course, as you said, like if the listener they have nice questions, very good questions, it inspires the speaker to speak more. And we see also in the Bhagavatam, this is how the sages, Janaka Rishi asks a few questions, and then Sukadeva speaks the whole first canto, is just answering the first three questions. And in this way, we can see that. And of course, the consciousness of speaker and listener should also be like if both of them have humility, then actually the nectar can flow. Like, of course, the speaker understands I'm just an instrument, I have listened myself, I just repeat what I heard, so there's no pride in, I'm the great speaker. And the listener has the humility in, I don't know, let me understand. Mm-hmm. Although he may understand and already know something, because we have heard, you mentioned we are not this body. Well, we have heard that so many times. But if we sit here and think, he speaks about this, I know this, then with this pride, I can't actually listen properly. So every time we sit in Bhagavatam, actually you should think, I don't know anything, let me try to understand, and then we are open to get more also. And the question regarding, it's often said we should just listen and then automatically get purified. In the Bhagavatam we have this famous shloka, Shrimvata Sukata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana, that Shrimvata means, Krishna is ready to purify our heart immediately when we listen, but we have to have this quality of develop an urge to listen to the message of the Lord. So in other words, to really get purified in the process of hearing, we need to have a strong desire to actually hear about Krishna. If that desire is not there, purification will not take place in the same way. If you just sit here and wait until it's over, that is Keshava. That purification is not there. Whereas when we actually have a desire to listen and understand, then there's much more benefit.
Thank you. It's wonderful. Thanks that you urge to listen. It's really neat. I would like to pick up on what you said first, like also the humility and pride. I know that. I think also our mentor, like Diogo Govinda back then in the seminars, he said before starting, right in the beginning, one of his exercises saying three words that are most dangerous. He said, everybody was thinking, understand? And then he wrote, I know that. So it's exactly this point, you know. And then he came to what he called spirit of discovery. That a disciple, not just any disciple, anyone who's a spiritual seeker, develops this mentality. I want to discover, I want to learn more, become thirsty, so to speak, for knowledge, and this way absorb. And also in the Shastras, in the Upanishads, Prabhupada makes an interesting summary of the this items of knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita in the 13th chapter. It's a really long verse. And then he mentions also one should become a scientist and philosopher in search of the absolute truth. You know. So, and what is a scientist and a philosopher? They're both people who are discoverers. They want to absorb a topic. They want to get to know more. Want to be able to explain it, understand it, put things together. And that should be the spirit also of a spiritualist. And it's also said, Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha, upayo vidrashtundas, tvanavas tattvadarshi. That those who are realized people, the tattvadarshis, they have concluded that the body is without reality or without existence because it's temporary, and the Atma is without change because it's eternal. And saying to this conclusion they came, or they arrived at that conclusion by studying the nature of both. And studying means inquiring, having a spirit of discovery, seeking answers, asking questions, like this. Yeah.
This is a question from question and answers from online.
So someone asked, there are questions which are asked by Gyanis, but there are also simple questions asked by Bhaktas. How will you select which one is good quality question? Could you please describe a little bit more about the selection criteria?
Okay, thank you for the question. Well, let's look at this verse. Let's take the verse of the sages, or better of Sutta Goswami, who's explaining here. He says, your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna and are of relevance to the world's welfare. So I think here we have a very powerful criterion, or at least two, for when is a question very powerful. I mean, there might be gradations. One is, it relates to Krishna, it relates to your spiritual life in the sense of enhancing or deepening your relationship with Krishna, or your capacity to engage in devotional service, to create taste in the spiritual life, to get an attraction to a particular form of Krishna. So these questions might be very relevant. And at the same time, if you ask about universal principles or truth that is absolute, naturally everyone else can benefit because then it's also valid for them. You know, there's questions that are individually, in my case, very relevant, but then there might be questions where we share a common ground, so to speak. You know, and then these questions are even better. And he says relevance to the world's welfare. You know, to also point out questions, point out again consciousness, and show what do I contemplate about. You know, if I only ask about how does everyone can become rich, well, my consciousness is not necessarily to the welfare of everyone, though it seems like, because not everyone can get rich. It needs those who provide the riches, and so for the benefit, the welfare. And also one criteria, I would say, how concrete is the question, how clear, and would be also, that's a bit more subjective, my sense of how sincerely, or is this person asking, or is this person more like that, putting the question. He said also the verse is interesting, that's a criteria we can have in mind. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. So he makes this point, he said at the beginning that questions and answers also accumulate apparently, like in satisfaction of the self, satisfying answers to satisfying questions. There's also this book, Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. Don't recall it so much, this long time ago that I read. Alright. Any further? So we stop here, is there some more? No. Mm-hmm. Good, then.
I have one.
Yeah.
The question before was that we must absorb.
Yes.
The question before was that we need to understand the other person's opinion, and then absorb it, and then reflect. And in one lecture in the high school, I learned that you can memorize best if you can connect it to something which you know already, like thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you apply this thinking by absorbing the other person's opinion without absorbing it too much that you think in the other person's way, that you still have your own opinion and understand the other person without accepting his opinion.
So, okay, if I understand you correctly, you are asking two questions. One question is like how to link that information that you hear, that you can memorize it, because you said you need a point of reference. Someone speaks and speaks, in order that you memorize it, link it to someone you know, that's something that you know already. And the other question is practically, how can I make sure that I don't get too much influenced or like take over the perspective of the person that I'm talking to? Well, with the first one is, I honestly don't have spontaneously the answer. My technique usually is like to carefully listen, just to try to hear and try to understand as good as possible. You can also in between ask, okay, you said this and that, I'm not clear whether I understand, can you again say this or that or repeat? You know, it's always space for asking again, you know. So, and of course, I think this linking, I would say, happens more or less automatically. I don't know how the conscious process would look like. And when it comes to the influence to what the other person doesn't come your perspective, empathy means that you tune in to another person's world. And this is different from agreeing automatically to the other person's world. So there we can make a distinction. Let's just say you are willing to have a look into this person's viewpoint and say, okay, this is your viewpoint. This is not automatically mine, but I'm willing to look at it and to try to understand it. Also in relationships, sometimes it's confused. If I empathize with you, feels like I agree with you, but it's not like that. You know, say there's something really bad you did, someone gets really angry with you. You know, or let's say you would do something, let's say you completely destroy my poster there. And then I come and we speak about it. Then you explain what happened, you know, and I reflect. You say, I understand you, this and that. Then I understand you, but it doesn't mean I agree, you know. That is okay. You get what I mean? So understanding means just to allow to get a perspective, then still but maintain your own viewpoint by just putting it next to it. So yeah, it's not confuse empathizing with agreeing. Okay?
So if I understand, it's depend also if
or my more thinking. Then we have better
it depends if something is objective or subjective. Because if, for example, somebody has had a bad experience, he can make an interpretation about something because he get deluded. He get
Deluded.
Delusion.
Delusion.
But if we speak about something objective, which is the truth, is the reality, this is completely change the topic, the meaning of the topic, right?
I'm not sure I get that I fully get your question. Maybe in my response you can see whether I get it. So even if you speak about something that's objective, we must first also get to an agreement that it is objective. Because sometimes we can see, okay, what makes now an objective statement different from a subjective statement. So objective would mean facts that you can argue with.
Yes.
It's not a matter of opinion, like
Yes.
something happened, it happened, everyone
Yes.
saw it.
Yes.
So subjective means then my personal viewpoint, how I may feel about it.
Yes.
And so of course, like this can, so if I come so much from a subjective viewpoint, then what you said delusion, then things can get twisted,
Yes.
you know, and so we rather stay on the objective side. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because he said maybe when we discuss with somebody, we share with somebody, maybe we can get in trouble because the other person maybe try to convince us that the thing is different. Right?
Yes. Yeah, right. No, I think I get, yeah. So one helpful tool you suggest is to stay, but to focus on the objective facts and try to carefully distinguish from personal subjective opinion.
Yes,
So
in what you just said, the link about the linking and also to not get entangled in too much in the perception of the other person.
Right. Yes.
Sorry about my English.
No. So maybe to conclude it, I would like to add to this. Yes, when we listen to someone, let's go back to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as an example from Shastra Krishna himself, who listened to this in two cases to few very influential people for a very long time without even saying anything. So Bhattacharya, once for 7 days, he was listening to his discourses, and they were highly philosophical, like so many explanations and opinions and interpretations, and also the Devija with his poetry, which is very complex. So what did he do? He became an observer and carefully listened. And when we listen to someone, I mean, maybe it's a learning process. Maybe it depends a bit on what type of person you are. Let's be clear. I'm witnessing something that is different from me, but I'm witnessing what this person is saying. So, and I can sort of say, what we speak about is the capacity to set boundaries in terms of the influence. How much do I allow this other person's opinion to influence my own? You know, and therefore, in also debate and also discussions, what is being done is that you stay on facts, you compare facts, and also up front, it's good that you become clear about what is actually my point of view. Let's again shift, the focus to oneself to ask, okay, what is actually my point of view? And then you can be strong in it, because sometimes the influence happens because I'm not so fully clear where do I stand. And then a person can influence me much more if I have a clear standing or point of view or conviction. So I actually would start with looking at where do you stand, what do you believe, to inquire into one's own mind. And that could be helpful to set a boundary, because then if you know it, this is my conviction, then you can distinguish yourself from the other person way better than if you're perhaps confused and you think, maybe this person is right, maybe I should see it like this.
Yeah, it depends with who you are speaking.
Yeah, also. Yeah, there's so many factors. Yes. All right, thank you very much. Because the time is really up.
Of course, if you speak with a master, it's different.
Yes, it's very different. It depends many
Or
factors.
somebody really who has really so much knowledge is obviously different. I was just saying something regarding what he just said.
All right. Yes, I think I got
Yeah, the
connection.
last question.
Thank you. Granted, Shri Bhagavatam ki jai,
Jai.
Shri Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Here's Madhava.
Ja.
Thank you.